Welcome to the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we're joined by Paul Schlueter, president of Flynn Wright. With nearly 30 years at the agency, he shares insights on leading through change, balancing strategy with creativity, and building a culture centered on client success. This episode is presented by Flynn Wright, Iowa's premier full-service advertising agency, serving clients from coast to coast for over 40 years. Experts in crafting stories that sell, Flynn Wright prides itself on helping brands drive performance and stay one step ahead. Paul Schlueter, thank you for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. How are you doing?
Great to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Eric.
Yeah, listen, just doing prep on this episode, I'm really excited about it. I know you and I have spent some time together and talked a bit of shop, but there's a lot to unpack. So, president of Flynn Wright, so for those who don't know, but you should already, is a full-service advertising and marketing agency founded in 1984, based out of Des Moines, but you got a second office in Sioux Falls now. I know that you spend a notable amount of time in Sioux Falls. You make that trip across the state and get up there. But you've been with Flynn Wright for, a long time. And I'll be fascinated, and I'm actually very excited to talk about your perspective, not only on this industry, but notably how it's changed over the years. So you're a UNI grad. Take off from there. Talk to me about your experience and just like how you got into this field and then really helped create Flynn Wright into the premier service agency in Des Moines and likely Iowa as well.
Yeah, it's probably a really boring story for most people, but it's my story. It's been a great ride in this industry. It's a fascinating industry that is in a tremendous amount of change right now. So I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah.
It's a great business because we make our own rules. And I often tell people, this isn't big business. This isn't corporate America. We aren't too big to fail. This is a business where you can fail every day. It's really, really easy. So you have to be all in. You have to be sharp. This is a thinking person's business, and that's really fun. So my journey, started at Northern Iowa, and I went in as a math major. I wanted to coach high school football and teach kids and have some fun. And, I'm a family guy. I've always been a family guy. I came from a big family in Mason City, and most of my family went down through Northern Iowa, and a couple of them were accountants, and I thought maybe that was my path, and I got there, and I thought math just is not me. I'm good at it, but it's not speaking to me. So I jumped over to the College of Business and really quickly just had a great experience there. And when I came out of Northern Iowa in '95, it was kind of the time of a lot of change. We were just getting email. We were just getting cell phones. The web was just in its infancy.
Yeah.
I get into my first job, and we're still doing mock-ups on pasteboard. There's some work being done on computers. There's some work being done offline. It's this really interesting time. It's a great time for brands. It was simpler. It was very straightforward. Storytelling, which is still critical to the puzzle, was just an absolute art form, I think. Positioning at the time, it was a concept that in college really hooked me. And, you get into this industry, and I found my way after a couple of years to Flynn Wright, and that was a huge change for me. It was an amazing group of people, really down to earth, really focused on doing something great. And I think I found a couple of kindred spirits there that over time, you just make something great happen.
How big would a Flynn Wright been at that point?
Because
you've grown a lot.
Yeah,
lately.
I was number 22, Eric.
Okay.
I was number 22, and I think there are 4 of us from that time.
Oh, wow.
That are still left at the agency.
That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
To be able to, you guys have been through that together then. The last, decades together.
Almost 3 decades now.
So you had said something that was interesting, that you're in an industry that gets to make your own rules. What do you mean by that?
Well, when we come into the office every day, no one's telling us what to do.
Yeah.
There's no process. There's no predetermined, this is your job. These are the things you put together. This is how it's done. This is what we expect. Every day we are making our own agenda. The clients, how we serve them, the prospects we want to go after, how we work internally in our own groups. And I think from that perspective, we've tried very hard to empower people. We have a very creative environment. It is a very intense environment because everything we do every day matters.
Yeah.
And I love that. There is no sense of, we're kind of a cog in a big machine and what we do today doesn't really matter. That is not the case at a place like Flynn Wright. It matters how we serve our clients every day, how we return their communication, their calls, how we plan, the expertise we bring on board, the things we try to learn. Every day that mattered. And I think in the early days, when I was one of 22, that was a huge challenge. We were small. We weren't that good. I sometimes call it the days of refrigerator art. It's just the work wasn't great. And we were all young. And over time, you just realized, hey, we can do this better. And we dug in after a few years and really started to put a different vision for the kind of work we wanted to do. And we became very intentional about the expertise, the quality, the way we wanted to serve clients, and ultimately how we wanted to put clients at the very, very center of every decision we make. And I think that's something today that, among a handful of things, makes us really different. And it's a challenging industry to do that, but that's our way.
So you referenced the years, but I mean, you're now approaching 3 decades with Flynn Wright. I know, but president in your current role now approaching 5 years. And tell me if you think about this often. So you and I have had this conversation where it's the clients come first, and that's cool. But you've had the benefit of work with some very notable brands, and I'll list some off: Mediacom, Bobcat, Catch Des Moines, Iowa Lottery, Fairway. By the way, I checked out your new website, and that highlight reel that you have on your homepage blew me away.
Yeah, it tells a story, doesn't it? Tells a story.
That tells Flynn Wright's story. Yeah. But what I find interesting about this is that, obviously your team's focus is on the clients, but there are millions of people that are seeing Flynn Wright's work. I don't know, insert an arbitrary amount of time. That's got to be pretty cool too. I mean, they may not always know that, but the way people are consuming information and content, like, you're impacting them as well.
Oh, everything has changed. And in 30 years, for starters, everything has changed. Not only the industry around us, the tools we have, the expertise we can bring, the way agencies, the modern agency is modeled is very different, I think, than it was. At least it should be, or you're probably not having a lot of success doing it. But our growth, you mentioned that last 5-year window. Yeah. From 2020 to 2025 has been the best 5 years of our existence.
What do you account for that? The work?
I account the culture first and foremost that we have created. The individuals. It goes back to people. And in our business, again, that idea that this place isn't too big to fail, that everything that we do matters. You need to have people in the door who understand that and really take that to heart, if you will. They need to internalize that and say, every piece I touch, every project I touch, every phone call I return, I need to be thinking about it because this is a thinking person's business. And if we don't have every piece of work surrounded by people who are thoughtful, who are excited about what we're doing, who bring in energy. So to your point, we went from pre-COVID, about a $60 million company. Now we're just on the doorstep of a $100 million company. That is a lot of advertising and marketing going out into the world and people seeing that work. But it's not about you. It's not about Flynn Wright. It is always about those brands you talked about. We are lucky to be able to work with the Fairways, the Bobcats, the Mediacoms, the Mid-American Energies of the world. We have just had so much fun fulfilling our mission, which is them. And I think in our business, like probably any, service business like ours, when you're a small business, you keep that focused at the center and you say, look, we're going to give our employees, everybody on this giant team, great opportunities, but we're going to do it by serving the people who put their trust and their dollars in us. And if you do that, and if you have fun doing that, it's an incredible industry, and it's incredible in part because it's so challenging.
Now, as president, but I'm sure this work came before that. Do you think about and articulate this with the rest of the team? I mean, the culture, the every touch point matters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a number of different ways it seeps through. One of my favorites, and we talk about this a lot as a team, you talk about it project to project, you talk about it campaign to campaign. It's that last 10%. Okay. You can make something good. You can even make something great, but it's that last 10% where it becomes something that we are exceptionally proud of because it moves the needle. Okay. It gets people into a store. It gets people onto a website. It gets them to notice a brand. I was listening earlier this week to John Wiffles talk about his experience at Wiffles Seeds, and he was talking about, the need to grow awareness for that brand. It's a brand we've never worked with, but it's a story that is very common in our industry. Knowing when you need to engage, when you simply need to create awareness. How do you do that? What is great storytelling? How is it authentic to a brand, the brand's experience? I mean, there's a million things that float around our people. And I think we've created an environment where they understand it. They love the work hard. They love that we're going to come in here and do something great. You can't just tell people, hey, you got to work hard. They need to understand working hard is going to be central to me being the best I can. In this case, being the best marketer, the best media strategist, right? The best client service individual I can possibly be. There's an intensity in that that's fun. It is a lot like an NFL team. Every year, it's a new season. Every quarter, every campaign, it's a new ball game. And you have to try to win every single time. And that's a lot of fun.
So when you hire at Flynn Wright, I would imagine that for any given position, there's a certain amount of skill sets that are needed, for that position. Beyond that, what are you looking for? Because I would imagine that, yes, it's a given, you need to know X, Y, and Z. But once you know that, what is Flynn Wright looking for in their next hire?
Super question, because I think that cuts to the heart of what we need to do as an agency and what fuels our success. There are going to be a lot of different people with the similar levels of skills. It is what's behind the skills that's important. Yeah. It is getting to an individual, for example, candidate A has all the right education, all the right trappings, great experiences. Candidate B has some skills, has had a really tough road, maybe came from a rough upbringing, maybe made it through something. We take a hard look at that candidate because at Flynn Wright, what we're doing, the ability to make it through something, the ability to have that kind of internal drive, if you will, whether it's courage, whether it's the ability to be vulnerable in the right moments and ask for help and get through something, whatever it is, there's just a little something extra that we look for that is authentic, it's real, and it drives success. And those people who have had to fight through it to get success, those people that started with nothing, those are really important attributes. And there's a lot of different ways you can kind of apply that. It doesn't have to mean, philosophically, it runs a number of different ways. Yeah. People who have come from a lot still might have that down deep kind of drive, if you will. It's just you have to look for it. You have to spot it. And we always say, too, we hire a bunch of kind-hearted type A personalities. We've created an environment where I try to be in almost every interview that I can. Yeah. And I often find myself saying, you don't step over anybody else to get to where you want to be at Flynn Wright. This is a rising tide lifts all boats, and it just takes it across the board. So do we have highly competitive people? Yes. We try to hire people who are genuinely kind and attentive because we're in the service business. It makes sense. It's at the heart of what we do. We serve each other, we serve our clients, and you really have to have that in your organization.
So this is fascinating, and I know that you know this, but having a lot of type A's in the same room, there's probably a fine line between that being incredibly productive and then falling off the cliff.
There can be, but that's where culture is.
Yeah.
That's where you seed the right culture and the right expectations, and people understand at Flynn Wright, they don't really love drama. And I think this is great. There's a lot of my peers and small business people that I know really work hard to say, look, leave that stuff at the doorstep. We are here not in service of wherever your mind is at the moment. Again, keep the clients, keep their interest, keep what we're doing for them at the center of everything we do when we're in these walls or when we're thinking about this business, which for many of us is pretty much all the time, because it's fun.
Well, that takes leadership too, which is a testament to not only you, but others on your team. I would imagine that you have to see these things throughout your office, and there may be times where you have to step in, but having that amount of talent in one room is what got Flynn Wright and continues to get Flynn Wright to where it is. So this was interesting. I mean, all these things that you talked about. So I went to your new website, and I'm looking at trying to find your bio just so that I could review it. I didn't get a lot of information on there, but what I did get, and I'll paraphrase this, but I copy and pasted it onto here, is that you talk about the things that are interesting to you. Which and these types of bios I find to be incredibly valuable because they're a window into the way that you think, and you reference history, psychology, but then you talk about lessons in empathy, lessons in strategy, life lessons that you've learned, but most importantly in this business, lessons in grit, which I feel is something that you talked about and that you look for when you're hiring at Flynn Wright as well.
That's probably the best way to put it, and probably something I should have said if I was on my game. So I'm not on my A game right now, Eric.
Oh, I think you are, but I mean,
it's grit. Grit's incredibly important.
Yeah,
it is not. It is just. It's not enough to be someone who looks the part. You got to have it down deep.
Yeah,
and
I
you
do.
got to have all those skills, and you have to be able to bring it because the people with grit do it when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
And that's what helps make this business great. The other thing, and a point to what you made earlier, and I just think this is a great point in business. It is about leadership, and it's about leading a certain way. And I think we have always espoused a philosophy or just internalized it and acted on it where we're always at that place with them. That room of type A's or that room that's going through the process, our leadership is always in it. We are committed to keeping, whether it's myself, Aaron Kennedy, who's CEO, our other partners, we are on client work. We are in the trenches every single day. That's what we tell people when we hire them. There isn't a lot of time spent running the business. We are in the business because it's for our clients. So when they are with you side by side, and when these employees know you view my ideas and my perspective as much as you view your own, and you take it all to heart, that's the culture we've created. So everyone really does know, hey, I'm heard. I have a role. I have an opportunity to do great things. And it's not necessarily a room of equals. I don't espouse that either all the time because quite frankly, there need to be people who make decisions and take actions. But it is a room where those talents really can come together and thrive. They're not one-off. 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5 if you do it the right way. And the key ingredient to bringing that together is culture. Empathy is a huge piece of it. I'm actually glad you brought that up off my bio because I think the business is so hard. Being in small business is hard, right? Having the kinds of goals and expectations we have is challenging. Being in our industry right now, as the world changes incredibly fast, is hard. So you have to have empathy for your clients and their situations, your fellow employees, what they're going through, and just what we are all going through personally as human beings. We're in an industry where we're supposed to understand humans. So if we don't, who does, right? And that's really key, is to kind of have that.
Well, I appreciate one of the things that you said as far as, there are times where you just have to come in and make a decision. You have a lot of talent at Flynn Wright, and person I worked with in a previous career, he made a point once to me about decision making, and he said, I'm going to make this decision because if it goes a certain way, maybe a negative way, I'm going to be the one that has to clean it up. And so I'm going to make this decision, and it's going to be, whatever it was. But I found that to be interesting because, you can take input from a lot of different people, and you can, make decisions on that input. But at the end of the day, I'm sure there are times, Reynolds Kramer, CEO of Fairway, he talked about this actually in the same room, that, he goes, I have to make the big decision, whatever that is. 2 to 3 times a year where I just have to come in and say, this is what we're doing and this is the route that we're going. Do you find yourself in that position?
For sure, and I remember that bit, and he did a great job. I reached out to Reynolds and said, "Hey, I was really inspired by your interview and what you did on the podcast. It was great because I felt quite often, certain leaders and certain philosophies, you share a perspective and you can hear somebody talk, and I could hear Reynolds talk and think, I've been there. I understand because leading can be very challenging. It can be really lonely. When you talk about making decisions, it's often, look, I'm going to deflect the praise off of everybody else in our team I can, but when it comes to the concerns, I'm going to take those on because you need to, because there's a whole lot of dynamics as a leader that you're managing all the time. And you're asking these people to do amazing things, and they're capable of creating amazing things. But in the end, we're all just still people. And sometimes there needs to be somebody at the helm who can keep it steady, who can make the really hard decisions. Early in my career, I would point out a guy, Andy Flynn, who, was, when I came to the agency, Andy was the guy who helped us get to another level because he was great at the hard things. Anytime you had a big problem, that guy was there to help solve it. They're really pretty amazing. In fact, I went through some things both personally and in professional circles where I was on boards and things and faced with very difficult situations I didn't know how to handle. And I remember often going to him and saying, how do I handle this? Where do I start? I'm a young guy and I'm facing a situation that it seems like it should be somebody 20 years older than me who's dealing with this right now. And he was really good at saying, here's what you do. And I'll help you make that decision. And when we were going through our growing pains when we were really young, he was often a guy who would sit and say, you know what, I'll make this call. This is what we're going to do, and they were often really difficult calls that some of us would say, wow, I can't believe we're doing that, but that takes guts. It takes courage. But he also had a real singular vision. And there's a number of us that I think have learned that vicariously from having been around personalities like that, around some client personalities who are like that, who are really genius at the difficult things. And I think you just end up modeling it and you realize, it's something that we all take on at one time or another.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, this is clearly a theme of leadership that I've experienced just in conversations on this podcast firsthand in that the leaders of today were very aware to get feedback and guidance and just watch intently the leaders when they were younger. I mean, and you just learn along the way. You had mentioned that, and this is a conscious decision, the way I interpreted the way you said this, about like you're in the mix with clients all of the time. So this is a conscious decision at Flynn Wright. Does it keep you sharp?
Oh yeah, you have to be sharp. I mean, you
on your toes.
It's a challenging thing, and I will say this, and I think it's an issue in my industry. It's an issue probably among my peer group. This is a young person's business, and that's another leadership thing where you have to be willing to admit this takes an energy, it takes a focus, that it is a young person's business. And you hear it often in the advertising and marketing space, something called founder's disease, where individuals an agency's built on a big personality, or any small business, any professional services firm, they're built on a big personality, and the business can never get over that. It can never survive beyond that. And one of the beauties, I think, of why we've been so successful is about 10, 15 years ago, my partner, Aaron Kennedy, came with this vision that said, look, I want to do something that's not done an awful lot in this town, in this state, and I want to build something that lasts beyond all of our tenures. And that requires succession, that requires looking ahead, that requires being vulnerable to the fact that someday you might not be necessary. Moreover, to the point, and Reynolds made this point with you, your job is to go find the kinds of people that are going to make you unnecessary, that are going to make you much less relevant. And we now, deep down, and this is another one of those things we look for, we have a philosophy that you need to go out and find people. You need to hire people who will do it better than you. And I think that has triggered the kind of culture, the kind of growth, because across the board, our business is littered with people who I look at today and say, you are doing that way better than I was doing it 10 years ago, 20 years ago when I was your age. And yes, they have different assets around them and they have different opportunities, but fundamentally incredibly bright people, incredibly creative people. And I do think that takes a certain amount of vulnerability to commit to that. And not everybody likes to look that in the mirror and face it down. I love it because that's our purpose. The purpose is not for this business to stop with Aaron Kennedy and Paul Schlueter or anyone else who is here. The point of this business is to keep serving clients and to keep getting better and to be more successful than you were. And you have to have some sort of core vision in mind to do that. And I think we're well on our way.
I mean, it's a really powerful thing that you just said in that it's this weird combination. And you use the word vulnerability, but it also requires some confidence as well. And oftentimes those two things don't always go hand in hand to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's probably the kind of unique people that we attract. That you're right, that sense, that Renaissance feel of somebody who is both at the same time probably wise enough to be a bit vulnerable about what their limitations are, what they're really good at, to be self-aware, we say is huge in our business. To have that sense of this is really where I play well, but also to kind of package that up in an individual that's got a ton of confidence, that believes in their ideas, that believes in their creativity and what they can deliver. And for the most part, you're not in this business unless you're pretty full of confidence. And for the most part, I think small business people, entrepreneurs, they got a lot of confidence. That's probably the easier part. I think the harder part is looking yourself in the mirror and saying, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I'm not good at. And how do I embrace that? Because nobody's good at everything. Very few people are good at multiple dimensions. Usually we have some aspect of it that is really our breakthrough, if you will. And that's why it takes a village. And our village went from 22 people to 100 people now. And by the way, in addition to Sioux Falls, now we have a Portland office that just opened up.
Okay.
Yeah, over Labor Day weekend. We've got that up and running, and we do those things out of need. We do them out of opportunity, and they just tend to grow and stretch us in ways. And, like I said, the business just keeps moving forward. This isn't the brainchild of any one person, any one family, any one thing. This has become bigger than all of that, and I love it. And I think it says this thing's going to be successful for a long time. And it's a great model for any business. It's a great model for small business, public service firms, things like that. And it's fun to talk about, honestly. When you get in the trenches with people who care, people who are successful, you hear the passion from a John Wiffles about what his business is like and what it took to get there. You really gravitate toward those stories.
This episode of the Area Podcast is sponsored by...
You have a story to tell. That story has a job to do, to be seen, to be heard, to sell. Find inspiration and insight. To use persuasion to change behavior. To turn strategy into tactics, tactics into action. To sell. Nobody does that better than Flynn Wright.
It all started with the mulch colorant that made our name. And now, Color Biotics manufactures millions of pounds of product month after month, bringing brilliance and resilience all around the world. And as we look ahead, all we see is growth. A growing customer base and growing sales mean a growing team. From the lab to the field, backyards to ball fields, and beyond. We need vivid imagination, intense passion, and brilliant ideas. If that sounds like you, we have one question. Are you ready to get to work? ColorBiotics.com/careers.
Just south of Iowa State University, in the heart of the Midwest, sits the Iowa State University Research Park. 550 acres of opportunity and innovation. With over 1 million square feet of developed space, it's home to more than 145 tenant companies, from startups to global leaders. Discover innovation hubs, collaborative spaces, and a community that's shaping the future. Whether you're scaling up or starting fresh, ISU Research Park has room to grow. Visit isupark.org to learn more.
All right, so I'm a company, say I'm based in Des Moines. I reach out to you, I reach out to Flynn Wright. What am I looking for? I mean, kind of give me some examples of things that I'm looking for. And if I'm the company, am I bringing the strategy and ideas to you, or do I just say, what do you got for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, the answer is it's all of the above.
Of course. I kind of knew that actually, but
but you're looking for people who understand your business model. You're looking for people who inherently ask the right questions, who understand the business situation. One of the things that has driven our business ahead is the fact that we aren't just good at advertising, marketing. We're not just really good at applied media or the sales funnel. We are really good business consultants first. And we teach our client service people to be exceptional at strategy, at applied strategy, to understand the difference between operational strategy, go-to-market strategy, product and pricing, all of those things so you're coming to an agency like Flynn Wright saying, these are my goals. That's really all I want to express, right? I mean, I do my thing. I need you guys to help me do this one piece really well. And it's really, you're looking for someone who asks you the right questions, who seems to have the right perspective, and it tumbles down that, that path, if you will. Ultimately, you're then looking for people who have the expertise. I personally think we're at an age right now, really challenging. A lot's changing.
Yeah.
You need to have that expertise in-house. You need to be the originator of it. You need to control a great deal of that expertise, or the platforms and the technologies are going to kind of run you over or tell you how to run your business. And right now, probably more than ever in our industry and in our business model, scale is really important. If we weren't the size we were, if we didn't have the type of clientele that we did, our business becomes much more challenging. But we do. And so we have that expertise across a broad spectrum of areas, and we really control the way we implement at a tactical, at a technical level. And if you don't have that control, if you're outsourcing that as an example, or a great deal of that, I think my industry is struggling with that question right now. Where is our value proposition? Where do we sit? And we're going to struggle with that alongside everybody else. Don't get me wrong. It is very challenging right now. You've got huge money in Google and Meta and other platforms, and you've got AI flooding into the market, and everybody wants to say it pays off and that it works. So there's a lot of investment going into that right now, and some of that funnels to agencies to deal with, essentially. And are you in a position where you're smart enough to know how to deal within that and still add value, to still lead? Or are you being led?
Yeah.
And those firms that are being led, those marketers that are being led, are, I think, experiencing a really challenging time. It's fun.
I know. Well, it is interesting.
Every day it's changing right now.
So let's talk a bit about creativity. This is a topic that's interesting to me, because a client could come to you and outline goals, and when you're in the creating content part of the process, there is an infinite number of directions that you could go. I mean, and thousands of decisions that are probably made at Flynn Wright before they even reach the, your client, and to be able to showcase that. So how do you pair creativity with, you have to meet these goals, you have to accomplish what the client wants to do, and then how do you articulate those things? And the one final point is, creativity is interesting to me, because in retrospect, let's say you have a campaign and it's a massive hit. You think it's going to be a hit. You hope that it's going to be a hit. You have the talent to make it a hit, but there are external factors that also impact all of that, and you have no idea as you're making it what it's going to end up being. Like, that's just the creative process.
Yeah.
So how do you channel all of that stuff into, deliverables for clients?
Okay, this is I hope we have an hour. 'Cause
Yeah,
this is
right.
going to take
No,
a
there's
while
a
to
lot.
unpack all of this. First off, when I am with my family, amazing people, I am viewed as one of the most creative people in our circle. I come into the office, I am probably the least creative person in our office.
Yeah.
And that is actually really refreshing.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
bet.
you talk about that process of creativity and what goes into it. The key that you didn't mention and the web that connects all of it is strategy. And that is really difficult. It's really an esoteric discipline. A lot of people don't really understand the fundamentals of it, where it's different, how it's applied, how to even visualize it. We do a lot of visualization of strategy because people are visual learners. Our clients are visual learners. Executives, by and large, need visualizations to say quickly, I understand that. I understand what you want to do. I understand how you want to move the market, who the target is, how you're going to reach them. Let's go.
Because words can't describe it.
Words can't do it. And no one reads anymore, by the way. No one reads. Don't put anything in print because nobody reads anything. Put it in video.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
It's we tell stories, but rarely anymore, unless it's multimedia, do we just purely tell stories with words. And I actually love old-fashioned storytelling, but you don't do it as much. Anyway, strategy is the piece that connects all of that. So before they see the ideas, is the situation you were setting up. Before they kind of get to the end game, it is, how are you connecting the dots? What is important about the situation you're facing? Take one of the greatest stories in advertising right now, Modelo. I mean, amazing campaign. Absolutely amazing. This brand went from being outside the top 10 maybe a decade ago to one of the top brands, and in moments, the top brand in the beer market domestically in the U.S. And this is an import. But if you've seen what's going on, you can just feel the strategy behind it. You understand how they targeted a segment, but then how they broadened that very quickly. They got a beachhead from which they launched something bigger. And the storytelling that's been evolving behind that brand for the last 5 to 7 years has been tremendous. They're beautifully shot spots. The stories are amazing. The inclusiveness of those spots, the cleverness of them, you cannot help but be sucked into those and to want to drink that beer, to be quite honest. And it shows. No one has made a move like that in the beverage market unless you are a completely new product, right? Seltzers have made a huge growth in the market, but that was really a dynamic new product that, as you said, it catches a lot of things right. But even through all of that challenge, you have this brand that's been around for a long time, ignite something and bring a whole new energy to the market. And there's a ton of strategy behind what they're doing. It is incredibly smart what they are tapping into. But then on the backside, you see the creativity. And the creativity is tremendously applied. And it's applied in different areas of this country. It's applied differently. It's written and shot beautifully. It's the whole package. So I think when you have these wonderfully creative people, they often look back to our business folks, our client service professionals, and say, what's the core of this? What is the strategic foundation? Because I got a million ideas, but I can give you a dozen of my very best ones if you give me some guardrails on why this makes sense. And that's really in core to the art of great sales and marketing, is understanding the strategic elements. And it is not the sexy side, but it makes great creative ideas that much better. You have that strategy really in mind, ironed out. It makes sense. It's researched. It's thoughtful. That's how you win.
You are aware that you don't consume content like a normal person, right?
True.
I mean,
That's true.
you know
Yeah.
this.
Yes,
I
I know
mean,
this.
because everyone who has listened to this has seen some type of Modelo ad, and now they're going to go look it up on YouTube or someplace else to refresh their memory. But when you see those things, you're unpacking it in a completely different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just what you do when you've done it for 30 years.
On Mondays, is it common that stuff like this gets brought up in the hallways or in meetings?
It happens frequently.
I mean, it has
for
to,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, because
it's what we do.
everyone's looking at everyone else. I mean, everyone who creates things likely consumes them within the lens of which they create them as well. And they're unpacking that.
I suppose if I was a lawyer, I'd look at every legal precedent I see out there and say, I'm not so sure that was applied right.
Yeah.
But, it's not the direction we chose to go down here.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But there's so much. I mean, if you're in sales and marketing, in whatever format, if you're in a business like ours, you are at the heartbeat of the economy. You're at the heartbeat of how things move. It is, it is a really fun business, but it's easy to see the energy in it because we're never going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
It's just, are you good? Are you changing? Are you evolving?
Yeah,
Do
how
you
can you
understand the
pivot?
current context?
Yeah. So you and I had this conversation, and I like that you had put an emphasis on strategy, which is the area that you focus on a lot when clients come to you. You're thinking about strategy. So then what does that look like when you turn it over? And the fascinating thing that I find with creative people is that they have this instinct of creativity, whether it's in writing or in photography and video and how they shoot things and light things. People who are good at that are just instinctually good. And part of that is it's just built into them. Part of it is experience because they've done it a lot and they know what works and doesn't work. So then how does that get turned over to creative people, and what type of autonomy? Is it hard for you to give the autonomy up, or now you've built this process and system at Flynn Wright where it's working, but it's hard.
Yeah, that's at least it's a great thought for me, because any of our great creative people who are very strategic thinkers, they will take what you've done. They'll take your strategy, your idea, whatever it is from the business side, if you will, and they'll make it so much better. And they'll turn it on its head. And that's where you have to have that vulnerability, that willingness to say, I see what you're doing with where we started, and I am willing to look at it differently. And when I do, I can actually see it's so much better than where we were taking it. Those people who think differently, who have incredible creativity, they just need a jumping off point. They just need somebody to say, here's the basic framework, here's the basic context. But then we need to be able to let it go. Because they're going to take it someplace, and that's what makes our work great. That's one of the most rewarding things. There's a couple of things that are tremendously rewarding about what I get to do every day. One of them is to see that creative process take something and elevate it to a point where you couldn't have even imagined it would get there. The other, and I kind of referenced this earlier, is to see young people do it better than you ever did. Just to see that quality, that expertise, that perspective, that outlook, the way they handle something, and say that is just light years better than what I was doing at that age, what we were doing at that time in our career and our evolution as an agency. Those are the things that you do this for. As a leader, those are the things that make you happiest. And they are not something that's easily shared. Like some of those lessons of how difficult it is and lonely at times to be a really good leader. Sometimes you just have to love it. And it's not always easy to share, express that, because it just, humans and emotions and everything gets messy, and sometimes gets misinterpreted or reinterpreted or whatever. Yeah. But it's enough to just look at it and say, it's amazing. What you people do is amazing every day.
Well, it really is. And when you pair that with the right culture, that's when you can get what Flynn Wright is doing. Passionate people in general and creative people as well. At some point, that passion and creativity was developed and harnessed in isolation, where, creative people, they're just creating because they love to do it. But transferring that when they are their own judge of their work as well, and then moving that into a team can be clunky because what you think is absolutely great may not resonate with everyone, and ultimately there is a client to serve, and you're serving as president, and so that's where this culture and teamwork and working together. I mean, I remember going through that process where I was creating things early on in my career, and getting feedback on the stuff that, you've spent hours and hours and hours on, and people, make decisions on whether they like it or not right away, that can be hard until you get used to it. I always show my wife stuff because she is the quickest to tell me what does and doesn't work in her lens. And she'll admit this too. I don't always agree with her, but oftentimes she is more right than not. And I have to make that pivot. Sometimes I say I have to let it marinate a little bit. And then ultimately I do change, I may have to make that decision to change it, but that's where culture comes into play.
Sometimes those people, by the way, are great perspective.
They are great perspective.
I can take things home to my family, and my wife has often said, that doesn't really work for me. And I have to think, well, you're probably more like, she's not an insider. She's more like the market and the audience. And there's things to be learned from that. It's like, and then I put on my hat as a focus group moderator, which I was for many years in my career, and I start asking questions. I say, okay, tell me more about that. And that's fun too.
Helps you process as well along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Our industry used to be much more of, hey, I've got the idea, I'm putting it all together, I'll show it to you in the morning. Now it is much more of an iterative, collaborative process. The key is that within that collaboration, you still need to understand when the idea is right and when the idea just simply needs to be executed and needs to breathe. And you can't, there's very little analysis paralysis, so to speak, within our organization. And it isn't a democracy as much as it seems that way quite often. Great creative minds need to make the decisions. And it is hard. It's hard to take these ideas and refine them and take them to a client, and sometimes have a client say, I don't get it. And you've been working with this for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you see where it can go. And there's a certain kind of brilliance you see in it. And then you realize either it missed the mark or they don't see it. Yeah. They're not internalizing it the same way, and it's back to the drawing board. But you're never going to run out of ideas, and that is a comfort.
How do you moderate risk-taking before bringing stuff to the client? Because there is a safe approach, I would imagine oftentimes. There is maybe a moderate approach, and then this is really awesome if it hits.
Yeah, in our world, there's a few different ways we address that. Okay. For starters, and again, it helps when you have scale and big programs and there's an expectations, but we often are doing market research for big ideas to make sure they're going to land, right? You might not have them refined, but you need to know if there's a roadblock, and you need to know if they're going to land or if they're not going to land. A lot of the work that we have done, they're not off-the-wall, madcap, just an idea to be an idea. Yeah. They're always rooted in that core of strategy. What's the go-to-market? Yeah. How are we getting there? What's our unique position? And really, for the most part, the client looks and says, are you bringing me an idea that fulfills what we all said the strategy is? And that's the litmus test. Now, there are ways to execute it, and there are definitely ideas that make your palms sweat. Yeah. And those are usually the really good ones. And
right, that's what I mean.
And sometimes the only test is the market. Sometimes it's just a great idea and everybody can see it's a great idea, but it might not take. And I've been around a few of those in my career, and I've been around a few that have dramatically changed client trajectories, and those are really fun.
You want to talk about one? I mean, is there one that comes to mind?
Yeah, there's one that comes to mind early in my career, back in the heydays of the wireless industry. And we were in on a pitch at a very vital time in our business. It's one of those roll of the dice things where, if you hit, great for you, and you get to come back and play again, and you get to grow, and you get to add some staff. And if you don't, then I'm not sure where it would have taken us. But we pitched an idea to take a small regional player that was very tech-focused, because that's where the market wanted to be. The latest phones, the latest gadgets, the latest things. And we brought them the insight that said, that's not you. That's not you at all. What is at your core is the way you respond to customers, the unique brand of customer service you provide, the intimacy you provide in an industry that's being overwrought by technology. And this is back in the early 2000s. So we're still talking to flip phones, and things like that, right? And they had a really tough time with our idea. but ultimately they said it's the right one and it's going to change us. But what they did, and you don't always get this, they embraced it 100%. And they said, we're going to be behind this, from our customer service teams to our sales teams to the way we product to the way we price things. This idea in the core of it being a core idea called "We Answer to You," which was very different in that industry at the time, right? It was not a technology, a phone forward idea. It said, wait a minute, in all of this communication that's busting wide open, we are here to serve you. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to help you through this. They let that fall into everything that they did, and that company grew tremendously, so much so that within, I think, 6 or 7 years, they were bought by Alltel, which was one of the major players at the time. And they were bought specifically because they said, we want to understand what your secret sauce is. We want to buy it because you are blowing up, and we need to understand how this is happening. And they had this amazing stretch of geography that was also attractive, and that was fun. It was a incredibly difficult 6-7 year period of my career and a few others around the agency, but it was a blast. And it is so fun when you see it implemented at that level.
Oh, yeah.
A great idea that a client takes to a place that you never could have imagined. And they said, we're gonna take this idea to a place that is gonna affect everything and how we go to market. And that's what Modelo's doing. That's where great things can happen, a great idea, the right touch point, the right moment with a consumer that says, we get you, and you're going to know that we get you, and everything that we do in this path to you starting to work with us is going to just make sense. Yeah. And suddenly, word of mouth, appreciation, awareness of advertising and marketing, all of those things just you can just see them click, and they start to work together in a way that we always try to manage in little bits, but you rarely see the sea change like we did there. That was just one example, and a really, really fun one. And I remember it because the president of the company said, this really makes my hands sweat. This is a very different direction for us to go. You're asking us to go 180 in a different direction. How am I going to sell this to my entire company?
What a cool pivotal moment, though. Just for that company, but your company and your career, and you hit it. So,
you get hooked on those things.
You do. And you don't forget them. You learn along that way.
Yeah.
You just do. It's those challenging moments in a career where you probably get the most clarity on the assets of your company and what is really working, and then how to move forward. And I'm sure you think about, the lessons that you took from that, I'm certain are probably still implemented today, even just the way you approach clients and all of that.
Yeah, a lot of strategic kind of touch points, especially in that kind of go-to-market strategy realm, really seeded then. And a bunch of us that worked on it were much younger people than we are now. But to see it come to fruition and to learn all those lessons along the way was great. And it's always about the clients. There's so many client relationships in this business that you develop with individuals that you still talk to 20, 25 years later that are still important to you. That's such a rewarding piece of this business.
So advertising and marketing, it's always been an evolution of change. You go back from radio, TV, print, but does it feel more chaotic in the last 5 years than ever before in how consumers are taking in information? Linear television is very different than what it was 20 years ago. And even social media is now 20 years old, but it's very different today than what it was back then. And now people have grown up in that. Everything was new at one point, and social media is not new. And then now AI, can we even predict what that's going to look like in 5 years?
If you do, I don't think you can do
year?
It truthfully.
And so how does Flynn Wright, how do we navigate that? How do you navigate that?
I think there's a couple things to think about for anybody who's a marketer right now, for anybody who needs to understand these tools. for starters, the fundamentals haven't changed that much.
Okay.
Great storytelling and how you understand your market, many of those essential kind of strategic foundations, you still need to keep your eye on those. It's how we deliver them that has changed immensely.
Okay.
There are far more ad units available in our industry than there ever been over far more platforms. So when you say chaotic, it is a lot more complex. And every one of those platforms is striving to be the one. So they generally have their own rules, their own procedures to follow, their own reporting, their own data sets. So you start to see how an agency like Flynn Wright suddenly needs to be an analytics firm.
Yeah.
And now we need to be a reporting firm on top of our analytics. And by the way, we need client data, because the way to make our analytics come to life is by hooking them into client data. We need to not just understand how we are driving things through media, but we need to understand how they land.
Yeah.
So that has become a really important piece of the puzzle that is still, in some respects, in its infancy, because it's not easy to embrace across every platform. But if we can connect success to what we know about your customer, what we know about the products they chose, their purchase history, where they're at, what segments they're in, what they're like, what their behaviors are, we can model much more efficiently. And that's where some of the magic happens. But when you look at things like AI moving into the market, I think our view of this, certainly my view of this as I see it, I think there's going to be a bubble sometime in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be a lot like the 2000s and the dot-com crash. And then out of that, the most viable platforms are going to fall out. But right now, and it's fascinating from a business perspective. Whether you're reading the Wall Street Journal or Harvard Business Review, everybody's writing about what's going on in this sector. And I think you're just seeing a crazy amount of investment. And you're seeing platforms say these investments need to pay off. Well, they're going to keep doing that, and they're going to keep pushing you towards it by any means necessary. And this is where the conversation from earlier comes back around. You need to have scale. You need to have expertise to have that sense of control and viability. If you do, you can ride it out and understand how to work within this constantly changing environment. But at some point in the next 2, 3, 5 years, there's going to be more than likely a fallout. There's going to be some sort of burst of this AI bubble, and then you're going to see real platforms that have long-term staying power. Right now, it's a little like it was before the dot-com crash. And I remember that time well. We were throwing everything against the wall to see what would stick. Metaphorically,
'Cause you didn't know.
And actually, if you remember the Outpost.com commercial with the gerbils, why are we firing gerbils out of a cannon? Which, by the way, you could never do today, right? But I mean, that industry was throwing everything against the wall to see what would stick. It all burst, and then some really clear platforms came out of it. I'm sure there's a bunch of young people that work for Flynn Wright that don't understand that Amazon was the world's largest bookseller.
Yeah, correct.
When that all started, right? It's a world of change, but you need to be able to ride them out moment to moment, and we have specific individuals at our firm who have specific areas of expertise, and I think that's an important layer to understand that you need. And you need to really respect those individuals who get into those platforms, who know them, and they need to understand and be able to internalize what's just knowledge for knowledge's sake and what is knowledge that really impacts our clients, our creative teams, our planning teams. And that's where when we walk in the door and say everything needs to be intentional, that needs to shine through, right?
Do you believe, I agree with you, by the way, in that there will be a bubble. We'll see certain things rise to the top. There will be clarity. And then, there'll be another mess after that on some industry.
No doubt.
And then it'll, we've seen this happen before. But the through line, and you referenced it, storytelling will continue. Good storytelling will continue. It'll look different. How it's being delivered will look different even 5 years from now. But there are certain themes that just have a way of transcending time because they're core to how we interact.
Yeah. Why are you here? Why do I want to work with you? Why do I want to buy your product or take your service? I mean, there always has to be a reason. There has to be a differentiator, a something. And there are a lot of different ways right now to tell that story. That's the big thing that's changing quickly. But it means there is a big fragmentation of those channels in which to tell that story, which opens up strategic opportunities.
Yeah.
Do we want to own a channel? Is there a section of channel that we want to own? What delivers best for our message? What really resonates with our story, if you will? Those things are still the same basic consideration, the same fundamentals. How do you price within that? How do you promote within that? These things are all going to be there. It's a really fun time. It's also probably, for most of our industry, a really stressful time trying to figure out and stay on top of this. Where's it going? Yeah.
It could be different tomorrow.
It absolutely, yeah.
Do you have a personal or professional win from the past week?
Yeah, I do. We brought on board a couple of people over the last 2 weeks that, anytime we bring on somebody to the agency, it's an opportunity to really change our place. And that's what we always say. I don't care if it is someone straight out of college. I don't care if it's an intern or somebody who's been in the industry. We got a couple of different examples of people this week, one who's new to us and one who worked for us almost 20 years ago and is now coming back. And they know what we're all about, and they know how we like to do our work. And I love to be able to make those connections and open up those opportunities. And when those people come on board and say, this feels so good, and I see now from the inside out what this place is all about and how that jives with what I've heard of how you guys like to operate, those are big, really human moments. I love them.
I love it.
And that's, for us, that's growth, brick by brick. Every one of those, you probably get that impression just from talking with me. Every one of those at Flynn Wright is incredibly important because those are the people that touch our client work directly.
Paul Schlueter, president at Flynn Wright, thank you for coming on. I mean, we could go on and on, but
we'll keep this rolling. I know you got to cut, but we'll keep this going for the next hour. So
we absolutely and we may. Well, for those listening and you like this podcast and certainly this episode, we would love for you to subscribe and tell others about it. This is the area podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance, personal stories, professional journeys.